It's lovely to see you. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Sue West, and I'm the host of this webinar series, Women 50 Plus Talk. I am the director of Flourish After 50, and the focus of my work is supporting women in their 50s, 60s, and 70s to flourish in this phase of our lives. And I think one of the things that became really clear to me when I began this work was realizing that there is no roadmap for aging. There's really not enough stories around and available for us about the various pathways and opportunities that lie ahead for women in their 50s, 60s, and 70s. That it can be a time of incredible uncertainty and also a time of search for meaning. There are a range of emotions that arise in this time, and there are real skills and strategies needed to be able to manage through a period of transition successfully. And so I designed this webinar series to inspire and empower all of us, including me, with stories from women who have managed transition successfully, to kind of hear their stories, but also learn from them about what helped, what it was like, and what helped, and what their advice to us would be. So in May, the series is focusing on late career transitions, and this is the second of 4 webinars in May. And how I'm going to run this is that we will shortly begin, and I'll introduce Maree, and at that point it'll be just Maree and I on the screen as we conduct the interview, and then we'll save the last 10 minutes to bring all of you back in with your questions. And so what I would like is that you hold your questions to the end, and when we come back on screen, you can use the hand up just to indicate that you would like to ask a question, and that will help me moderate the discussion at that time. We're recording this so that those who aren't able to attend will be able to get a copy of afterwards, and also will be able to share this story more broadly than just women who have registered for today. So just noting that. So to begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're meeting today. And for me, that's the people of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I pay my respects to elders past and present. And I'm voting yes, and I'm telling everyone that, and I'm encouraging others to do the same, because I think a voice to Parliament is critically important for the First Nations people of this land. And I can see from some of your names that you're from other lands, so I just acknowledge that we are all together in different places on lands of traditional owners. So with all of that said, I would like to move into the interview stage and introduce you to Maree. And I'm really, really been looking forward to this interview. Maree and I think we may have crossed paths at another time in our career when we were both connected to local government. And we think probably there's been a number of crossovers over time, but I was really delighted to re-meet Maree recently. Her career has included several high-profile roles, and when we think we overlapped, she was the Chief Executive Officer for a large statewide peak body. Her career took a turn at 50 when she finished her 3rd university degree. What were you thinking? I can't wait to hear about that, Maree. And she, a 3rd university qualification, I should say, and proceeded to start her own consulting business, something she never imagined she would do at midlife. She's now 57 and director of a very successful coaching and training company, and has authored 2 books, which you can see sitting next to her. And the most recent one is Worthy, which was shortlisted in the Australian Business Book Awards for 2022. To top this off, Maree this year received the Medal of the Order of Australia the general division, and is clearly an accomplished woman, and I'm really pleased that you're able to join us here today, Maree. So welcome to this Women Talk conversation. I'd love to hear how you came to be doing the work that you're doing now.
Thank you, Sue. Gratitude to you for inviting me. I've been looking forward to this too, because it's such an honour to be part of this series with you. And to all of the people who are tuning in right now live and listening later on, thank you. Thank you for being with us today. So how did I come to be doing what I do now? I've been reflecting a lot on your questions, Sue, and I've got some notes in front of me. So audience, bear with me. If I'm looking down, it's because I'm checking my notes, and they're in very large print, so I don't have to put my glasses on, which will reflect light into Sue's screen. So I was a kid from a regional high school. I always wanted to teach history and geography. That was my master plan at 16. And at the end of my HSC year, I saw a Four Corners documentary about poverty in Australia. It was looking at the Henderson poverty line, how families were living hand to mouth, families just like mine. And it had never occurred to me before that people lived like this, even though there were probably people in my own street and kids in my classroom who grew up in that circumstance. I didn't come from a wealthy family, but I was pretty blinkered because we had everything that we thought that we needed. And that Four Corners documentary blew my mind, totally blew my mind. And at that minute, I decided to throw teaching out the window and go and do whatever it was that would help me fix this enormous problem in the world. I didn't know what it was at that time, but a careers teacher helped me understand that that would probably be social work. Ah. So my very first entry into the world of thinking about this stuff was when I did my social welfare qualification. And that brought me into a career that took me into children's services, disability services, workers' rehabilitation, and a range of other things in the first decade of my working life. And at that point, I went and completed my second university qualification, which was a graduate diploma in business with a focus on industrial relations. Oh. So it was, that's part of the journey to where I got to now.
I love that. And it sounds like you're driven by a social mission. Can you tell us about that and how that's influenced where you are now?
Yeah, I think when I reflect on the things that were important to me in my childhood and the role models I had in my parents and those around me, it was all about, my family probably wouldn't have called it this, but it was very much community service, social justice. The values base was you put into the world what if you want something back, you've got to contribute. So you have to give more than you take. Yeah. So I think that probably underpins my childhood and the messaging I grew up with. And it's important to me to make sure that we leave the world better than we found it. So that certainly is the scaffold on which everything I do.
Yeah. So the early part of your career was teaching, then you moved into the social welfare.
Never did the teaching bit.
Oh, you didn't do the teaching bit?
No, I abandoned that. That was my sort of ingrained, probably unconsciously held bias that girls went into secretarial teaching or nursing.
Yes.
My generation, that was about what we did. But suddenly I was exposed to this new world of doing something different.
Yeah. So social welfare, and then you moved into industrial relations?
I studied industrial relations. I never worked in it directly, although I suspect everything I've done in management certainly drew on that qualification. There is no question it's been useful throughout my career.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And so fast forward to your third university qualification. What was going on at that time for you?
Yeah, so this was as I was starting to move out of that CEO role that you mentioned earlier at the VLGA. I'd had a series of mid-management roles in welfare agencies and non-profits, one previous CEO gig, and then the VLGA role. And as I was starting to I guess, extract myself from that, it was the end of my second contract. I was ready to stop. It was occurring to me that, you know, I was in my late 40s at that time. I felt like something big was shifting within me. And I wanted to go back to working directly with people in helping them, going right back to my very first early part of my career, which was all about, you know, self-determination, self-actualization, helping people find their own solutions. Something in me was yearning to do that rather than working on that bigger, you know, more strategic piece. So that was what led me into my postgrad studies in organizational development and coaching. But I didn't know what I was going to do with that. I just had a hunger to know about it. And I'd had a former colleague, this had been sitting in the back of my mind for quite some years. A former colleague had become a coach, probably just as coaching was becoming a thing in Australia. So much, much earlier. It's probably in my late 30s, I'd been exposed to this. And I'd had my own executive coach in my first CEO role. And that was a phenomenal experience. So I was tempted in that direction, but just wasn't sure, you know, would I go out and do this or would I use it in some other way? So it was a transition time for me. And, you know, I was getting ready to leave Melbourne and come back to the region. I had elderly parents. My mother-in-law had vascular dementia and she was dying. She had some care needs. And I felt the pull of needing to be back home for that reason. And thinking about, okay, so when I return, what will I do? How will I fill my time? What work will I be drawn to? So it was a really unsettling but curious time for me.
And so when you think back on that time, what were some of the things that you did that helped you get some clarity on what next for you?
So I think about, you know, I took 3 months. My intention was to take 3 months sabbatical on my return to Gippsland so that I'd have time to reflect and rest and think. And I was in the final stages of that coaching study. I had, I think, a couple of assignments and a semester to go. So it was really about opening my mind to what are the opportunities ahead of me? What do I feel like doing next? It'll be really good to reconnect with family and friends and to feel part of the region again. But I was also feeling that sense of, you know, what can I do? Not just what do I want to do, but almost who will have me? You know, there was that thing of, you know, will I be overqualified to do some things? Do I want to go back into a workplace? Have I outgrown this place? Will I miss the big smoke? All those questions were going through my mind. So I really needed to take the time to think.
Yeah. So time, what did you do in that time? And thinking is one thing, but what was the sort? I think of the sorting hat. Like, what was the sorting hat that was going on at that time that helped you form a sense of direction for yourself?
Well, I'd have to say the vast majority of it was spent in the garden. It was summertime, so this was a Christmas through February, March kind of break. So there's nowhere, I'm in my happy place. There's nowhere happier for me than in the vegetable garden. So it was growing tomatoes, cucumbers, peppers, eggplant, you know, all the Mediterranean stuff. So I'd get out there digging and planting and picking and cooking and standing in the sun, really finding myself again. I think there's something very powerful about standing in the earth and touching it, and getting my feet back on the grass, so that, you know, really getting the feel of, where do I belong? What wisdom is within me that I can, you know, propel back out into the world, thinking about what do other people need from me, not just what do I want to do. So it was a lovely time, and I had 2 beautiful Labradors wandering around, bumping into me the whole time. So that was kind of fun too.
It sounds like it was a time of really reflection, but also feeding your soul with the ways that you were spending your time to help you get grounded and centered in what you're called to do and what others might call on you to do. So where did you land in all of that?
Yeah, well, I think before I answer that, I think your summary there, it very much a reconnection with me.
Yes.
Reconnection with self.
Yeah.
If I reflect on it now, that's exactly what was happening, reconnecting with who I was.
Yeah.
And I guess reconnecting with my partner, you know, moving back into a house with my husband where we'd lived apart for 4.5 years. We'd spent weekends together, but we'd literally not lived together properly for 4.5 years. So that was, you know, that was interesting. When people talk about people who are, you know, in the military and go away for periods of time and have to kind of reconnect back into the house.
Re-enter.
Yeah, it's like a re-entry. Oh, nothing's where it used to be. You know, this is my kitchen. Hang on a minute. So that was pretty funny. So where that put me, getting back to your question about where that put me, I kind of got derailed by a very good friend who was a regional director in a government department, and my sabbatical ended pretty sharply when she convinced me to come into the public service for a 3-month role that became 6 months, that became 12 months, that I then had to extract myself from to sort of cut the tie. So if you like, in my notes here, what I've said is I went into the safety of the public service as a bit of a holding pattern while I considered what was next.
So what did that give you, that safety, that 12 months in the department?
Well, apart from a lot of frustration, it told me what I knew was, so it gave me some savings. I was able to put some money away for whatever comes next. So I was wise enough to stash the dollars, get some more money into my super and into the bank account so that I could make some other decisions. But what it told me was that I knew I didn't want to manage people anymore. After 20 odd years of managing people, I knew I was done. I could lead, but I didn't necessarily want to manage, if that makes sense.
Yes, yes, it does.
I also knew that I no longer wanted to be managed. So the flip side of that was, you know, I had far less tolerance for bullshit and game playing, and far less patience for hierarchy. So those 2 things dawned on me pretty quickly when I was doing that work. I got very, very curious to see what I could possibly do by myself. And I became incredibly conscious of my privilege as a white woman in Australia, and given the career opportunities that I'd had, and the places that I'd been and the people that I had met, I was really conscious of that. And I had a real drive around, well, what are you going to do with that privilege? It's your responsibility to use that wisely. So now what? And sitting here as a VPS 5 in the public sector probably isn't going to cut it for you.
Yeah.
So what next?
Yeah, I love that. And it sounds like that what you're saying there is that it really gave you further insights into who is Maree, and the things that you were prepared to do and no longer prepared to do, and that real reconnection with that kind of driving value that you identified that started when you saw that Four Corners story. So what next? What happened next for you?
So what happened next was I had a conversation with a trusted colleague who's also a consultant and a coach. And she took me out for lunch to one of my favorite cafes and gave me a thorough talking to, basically. She pretty much said to me, when are you going to go off and do your own thing? People are waiting for you.
Wow.
Was a really interesting comment and dreadfully unsettling. But she pretty much said, when are you going to do this? Like, if you don't do this now, when will you? Hang out your shingle and see what happens. And because I'd been sort of nattering away around, well, maybe one day I'll do this. And she's like, why did you do all this training? And who are you? She pretty much said, who are you to have come to this place and to then not be gifting that back to the world in some way? Which, talk about smack in the face. It was quite confronting. But it was also very powerful. And so in a sense, she coached me through my own fears. And, one of your questions was around what held me back.
Yes.
And, it was that fear. What if I fail? Or what if I hate this? And so her question was, what's the worst thing that can happen? You don't like it, or you're not successful? Ha ha. She said, what's the likelihood of that? But if you don't like it, you just go and get another job. What's the worst thing? You end up working for somebody else for a while. Would that be so bad? So, it was really the kick in the butt that I needed. And she helped me name my fears and talk to them rationally.
Yeah, nice. And so what then supported you to work through those fears to the point of being able to move forward in your new career direction?
What that prompted me to do, I think, was to consider who else was out there that could support me. So, I had the qualification. I had all the resources from the university around how to join my professional association, get credentialed, to take all the next steps. So I set myself a bit of a game plan, if you like. I had some goals around, do these three things and then make the next set of goals. So I didn't try to bite everything off at once. I took it step by step, but I searched online for business mentoring groups, things that I could read, inspiring people I could follow on social media, just to watch how they did things. And, people that I could talk to who had done this before, just like that colleague who gave me the foot in the backside. And some of the best advice I got was, just start somewhere. So I sent out a newsletter to my 800 plus contacts on LinkedIn. I wrote, it's nearly Christmas. Here's the books that I'm going to read over the Christmas break and the summer. And by the way, you might like to know that I've set up my own practice. And here's what I'll be doing. And if you're interested in doing some work with me or you've got questions, here's how you can reach me. And I sent it out into the ether and thought, oh, well, I guess maybe after Christmas there might be some emails, and the phone calls began straight away.
Nice.
So it was a really affirming thing to have done, and it just got the engine going.
Yeah, lovely. And while you're talking, I'm looking at the book over your shoulder with the title Worthy, and it sounds like there's a bit of your journey is discovering your self-worth and believing in that enough that you can hang up your shingle and then wonderful things happen. Can you tell us about your book?
Well, it's the irony of expertise, Sue, isn't it? That the title of the book is Worthy, and it's all about helping women see their value and and play to their strengths and use that value in some way. And it's the book that I wish I'd read when I was 30. So I wrote it for a woman that I met at an event. We didn't know each other. I was at a business event, a business networking event for women. We were seated next to each other at this dinner. And before we'd even started our first drink, she was pouring out her life story to me, as sometimes happens in these scenarios. The safest set of ears is often the person who's never met you before. And, you know, so she was telling me her story, and she got visibly upset about all the things she regretted not doing in life. And I tell her story in the introduction to the book. And I came away from that thinking, I have to write a book for women just like her. And then I realized that she was possibly the me who could have been me had I not done some of the things in my life that I had chosen to do. So it was that moment of, yeah, this is the book I needed when I was in my late 20s, early 30s. And it's the book that so many women need now. So it's got stories from some of my clients, stories from women that I've met throughout my career, some of my own pitfalls and failures, some of the things that I've got wrong. And it's backed up by some research from some of the world's experts.
Lovely. I look forward to reading it, Maree. So that's the book for the younger woman that you met at that time at dinner. If you were to think back to the you that was at the point of transition when you were doing that third university qualification and thinking about launching in a different direction, what would you say to that younger self, or what advice would you have looking back at that time of your life that might be of benefit to someone who's listening today?
I've actually got some dot points here, Sue.
Great.
This was my favourite question. You asked a question about what I learned about myself, which I'd be really happy to answer as well.
Let's start wherever you like, Maree.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I'll tell you what I learned about me. And this is partly to do with the worthy thing, I guess, because it's part of what I've learned in writing 2 books, which I never imagined. You know, if you'd said to me a decade ago that I would write 2 books, I would have laughed until I fell off this chair. Like, why would I write a book? Why would I write anything? So what I've learned about myself is that I'm resilient, capable, and way smarter and wiser than I ever imagined, that I ever knew. And I've done some amazing things in my 57 years on the planet. It's been a really rich and full life. And my curiosity serves me really well. I think, you know, it's bitten me a few times, but it mostly serves me well. Leading myself is as tough as leading others, but it's a lot more fun. I can write. So there's the thing. I can write something I probably knew much earlier, probably way back to my teens, but I didn't cultivate it, whereas I do, and I can write for pleasure. I also learned that I wasn't very good at asking for help. I was a bit of a martyr. I'm very glad to say that I'm much better at that now and continue to practice. And people are so willing to help. In fact, they want to. They're waiting to be asked. So that was a big lesson for me.
Yeah.
And the advice piece,
yes.
Forgive me while I'm reading from my list, but I think these are really important pieces of advice. I would say, if you're listening in now and curious about your transition, listen to your fear. Listen hard to your fear. Invite her inside for a cup of tea. Ask her what she's worried about. Answer her questions rationally as you would to a friend. And then ask yourself 2 questions. If I don't do this now, what things will I regret? And if I do this, what things will I thank myself for in 5 years' time? I think that's really important to ask those questions. I'd also say keep away from comparisons. kick them out, because, you know, you do you, and comparing yourself to others is generally quite unhelpful unless you use it as a motivating force. You know, if there's people you admire and you're motivated to be a bit more like them, that's great. But don't compare yourself through envy or a feeling of being less than. That's not useful. And find your tribe. Find the pit crew of people who will support you, the advocates, the thinkers and the teachers who can elevate your skills even further, and the truth tellers, who are the people that will tell you the honest truth, even if it's hard to hear, in a loving and caring way. So people that you trust, that aren't just, if I can be really frank, blowing smoke up your bum, the people who will tell you the truth with love. And surround yourself with those great people, not the naysayers. So there's my tips.
They are all excellent tips, and there's some really great advice in there. There's some gold, and thank you for sharing that, Maree, and thank you for joining us for this Women Talk interview today. I've really appreciated the generosity of your sharing of your story and your wisdom and your insights. That's been really, really delightful. I'd like to invite others to ask you a few questions. We've still got a little bit of time to do that. And I said earlier that it would be helpful if you could use the hands up button under the reactions and just to indicate that you would like to ask a question. Someone like to go first? I can see Jeanette.
Thanks, Sue, and thanks, Maree. That was great. I really enjoyed listening to you talking about the different stages of your career and your life and your family life. And I particularly related to the part about sort of connecting to the earth and how it can really, like when you're in nature, it can just really give you that space to kind of do that introspection. It's something very kind of primitive, really, isn't it, about getting your hands dirty and growing things. And so I could really relate to all of that. The question I'd like to ask you, I'm making this up as I go along, so it could be a bit messy, but you know, as we kind of you know, the further away 55 looks and the closer the older ages look, I'm wondering, and I see this in some of my clients, the self-doubt starts to come in around the age side of things. Like, you know, it seems like the people in the workforces that we work with are getting, you know, seem to be getting younger and younger, and, you know, we're not. And I'm just wondering whether in the people that you coach and train and in your own life, what role does aging play, or the feeling that, you know, you're no longer 55, play in, you know, confidence and potentially self-doubt?
That's a massive question, Jeanette. Thank you.
Sorry about that.
No, don't be sorry. I'm reflecting on, and I'm not sure if I can answer this in the way that will satisfy you. I guess I'm reflecting on what it's been like to become an older woman, an older person. And it, you know, it's recently occurring to me when I walk into a cafe to order a coffee and I get called Dal or Love, I realize that I don't look 25 anymore. I'm not seeing myself in the way that other people see me. And I guess we all hear about how we become less visible as we get older. But the thing that sits with me is that I remember being young. I remember what I felt like and what I believed and the sorts of judgments that I made. And so I stay curious with it rather than blaming people younger than me for what they see, because they don't know yet. They don't know any better. So I think it's kind of, there's a two-way process here. Part of it is helping people understand the wisdom that we have. And I have this conversation with my mum frequently. She's 85 now, very wise lady. And we often laugh together. And people who know me have heard me say this many times, but I often say to mum, when I was 18, mum, I knew everything, didn't I? I knew everything, but no one wanted to hear. And now I'm 57 and I know lots, but nobody's interested. So we roar laughing at that over our cups of tea. But of course they are interested. They're hugely interested. So I think, Jeanette, it's partly around this finding your tribe piece. I want to spend time with people who value my expertise, who are interested in my thoughts, who want to share their thoughts with me. I haven't got time for the rest. Like, I'm just not that interested in the rest of the BS. And I think when we get, it's very easy to be judgmental about younger generations. And if we get caught up in that difference between Gen Z and millennials and X and baby boomers, we can get really stuck on generational differences. And yes, there probably are some, but when I spend time with my nieces and nephews who are now young adults and their children, when I spend time with my best friends of 40 odd years and their children and now grandchildren, it gives me a really strong appreciation that we're not that different after all. And not everybody thinks the same way. So I hope that's a useful interpretation. I hope that answers the question. But please come back to me if there's something that I've missed in what you wanted.
Well, I have part two of that question, if I could be so greedy, and it's sort of a little bit unrelated. It's a slightly different direction, but what I see amongst my friends, and I've had a deviation in my career over the last 5 years as well, or a new direction, and people are sometimes a little flabbergasted that I could even consider doing something radically different. And I say to them, it doesn't matter how old I am, I will always see possibility in myself. And I'm wondering if you've ever bumped up against that. And I don't mean this in a kind of trying to hold you back thing, but what I see in the women around me, or not all of them, but in some women around me, is these self-limiting beliefs around, and maybe it's a societal kind of thing around, if you're of a certain age, whatever that is, put whatever number you want in there, that you should be on a particular trajectory, which does not include being adventurous in your career. And I just find that, it doesn't suit me, but I'm wondering whether that's something, around that worthy piece, where there's there's a bit of ageism kind of tucked in there somewhere.
Oh, I think that's spot on. And that's really, quite a lot of the book is about that, and about, stop the self-limiting beliefs, straighten the self-talk and stop mauling your mojo are two of the bylines on the book. But we also have to stop fixing women, because this, there's structural things in our society that create these frameworks. So, I would never want to write the book which is all about women fixing themselves, because they're the problem. They're not broken. Society is. So, but it's not enough to say, don't fix women, fix society, smash the patriarchy. We actually need practical tools to get around that stuff too. So that's the stuff I write about. Yes, it is structural. Yes, there are some mindset changes you can make for yourself, but here's the practical tools that you need. But yeah, I have absolutely bumped up against that kind of shock, horror, or response in people. And, why would you be doing this now? Or it's way too late for me to do that. And my question is always, so is that really the truth? What makes it too late? And it comes back to that question that I offered in my advice, which is, if I don't do this, if I don't make these changes, if I don't try this, what will I regret? And if I do, what will I thank myself for? I think really having the opportunity to dig deep and understand what fills your cup. And it's nobody else's business if it's stuff that you might have done in your 20s or that people think is more age appropriate for someone else. That's their issue. So I think it's really crucial that we role model that for future generations, that it's never too late to make these changes. And in fact, the research that Sue would know well about from your work, Sue, the research really backs this up, that some of the best times in women's lives can be 50 onwards.
Yeah, that's right. The evidence points to that in terms of career satisfaction and in terms of happiness levels. The U curve, it's just like it's up and up from late 40s onwards. But the other thing that was occurring to me when you were talking then was about that kind of and what inspired me to run this Women Talk series is that we have these really old kind of mental models about what aging looks like, but actually, and we are a generation of women who are better educated, have more opportunities and more pathways available to us. But we've got these really old mental models about what aging looks like. And so kind of cracking that open in the way that you've done just now, Maree, is a really lovely story to share, to show what possibilities are open to us. We've probably got time for half a question from someone else, if there's someone else who'd like to jump in here.
Don't be shy, folks.
Doesn't look like it. So I'll ask the final question, Maree, which is totally unscripted, so you won't be able to prepare for this, but what's the next book?
Oh, what's the next book? You're not the first person to ask me that, Sue, and I'm not entirely sure if there'll be a next book. However, my gut tells me there probably will be.
I hear a bit of the head and the heart struggling here.
I'm guessing that there's still some things that are unwritten. I feel like I've got something to say about wisdom. So it'll be something along those lines. And I'm leaning towards maybe interviewing a few people about what they've learned over their journeys and maybe wrapping something around that. So I've kind of committed myself publicly now, haven't I, to writing the next book. But I am intrigued about this wisdom thing, because it is very powerful. It's visceral. I think people can feel it. I can certainly feel it at this stage of my life, and it's a very empowering thing to not really care what anyone thinks of you anymore, and to really take off that. Take off those clothes and step out into the world as who you wish to be. Yes. And then, to model that for other people, I think is, it's a really lovely thing.
Chip Connolly from the States talks about the modern elder. And he, in America, they don't have the context of elders being Aboriginal First Nations people, so it's a different concept, but he talks about the modern elder who's as curious as they are wise, and that wisdom piece is really important in that that concept that he has of modern elder. So I recommend that to you and others listening today. But Maree, thank you very much. How can people find you, and how can people learn more about where to buy your book?
Well, the easiest way, Sue, is for people to go straight to my website. So, I think Lacey's going to share that in the chat section so that people can click and go straight there. So there's some free resources on the website. There's the About Me section. And of course, you can also access the books, and Worthy as an audio book is also available. So for those who prefer to listen rather than read, it's there, and it's read by me. So if you like the sound of this voice, you can listen to it for longer.
So you read your own book. That's fantastic. I love that. Thank you, Maree. And if you, I will invite all of you to join me again next Friday to hear the next Women Talk discussion, and that will be with Barbara Horn, who has a really interesting pathway to her retirement, which was very gradual, and now in her mid-70s, she's got a great perspective to share on some decisions she made that helped her transition out of work. So I invite you to join me, and if you want to learn more about what I do, you can find me online at flourishafter50.com.au. Look forward to seeing you again. Thank you.